What are you taking a look at, Krystal?
Well, guys, is America suffering an epidemic of loneliness? That's the question raised by some new data showing that increasingly, in ways that were accelerated by the pandemic, Americans are choosing to spend more and more of their time alone. So here is that data. It was laid out by economist Bryce Ward in a new Washington Post op-ed. Basically, if you're looking at this chart, up until 2014, the amount of time Americans 15 and older spent with friends was more or less stable. Then a dramatic shift happens that you can see here. The amount of time with friends and companions plummets, while the amount of time spent completely alone skyrockets. Now, it's important to emphasize this trend clearly predates the pandemic. In fact, the amount of time with friends fell further in the 5 years building up to the pandemic than it actually did during the pandemic. Now, this trend is also pretty consistent across all demographic groups, among the old, the young, the rich, the poor, the remote worker, and the in-person worker. Increasingly, Americans are choosing to spend more and more time alone. And as with so many things, the pandemic just poured gasoline on a trend that was already well underway. A raft of recent reporting provides texture to what all of this alone time looks like for different age cohorts and demographic groups, as reporters and researchers have tried to understand a new epidemic of teen mental health crises. They've taken a close look at how teenagers have shifted from in-person socializing to online socializing. And take a look at these two charts. This is from The Conversation. The one on top you see there, it shows what % of teens say they meet up with their friends almost every day. This chart starts in 1970 and goes through 2017. Now, at first, on the left side, the numbers slowly decline across the graph before falling off a cliff somewhere around 2010. The chart on the bottom shows why it matters, because at the same time that teens are seeing their friends less, they are also increasingly describing themselves as lonely. In 2017, almost 40% of high school seniors agreed with the statement, quote, "A lot of times I feel lonely." So, while teens are undoubtedly socializing in a different way than previous generations, it's also clear that the online social interactions are not filling the need that real-life social interactions once did. Let me show you one more graph that is really disturbing. This is a chart showing a dramatic spike in emergency room visits for self-harm among kids and among adolescents. Now, this trend starts in 2009 and continues unbroken since then. Now, I don't want to oversimplify. Loneliness is just one of a number of factors that might be contributing to a breakdown in teen mental health. But we know human beings are social creatures. We don't do well when we are completely isolated. We've also talked some here about a crisis facing men and boys. Part of that crisis appears to be a loneliness crisis. The New York Times just wrote up some of the data here showing that men are in what they describe as a friend session. Since 1990, the number of men who say they have no friends at all have seen a 5-fold increase, up to 15%. Meanwhile, fewer than half of men say they are actually satisfied with the number of friendships that they do have. Could this be part of the reason for men dropping out of the workforce, suffering from addiction, dying deaths of despair? Are elders also increasingly writing out their golden years solo? More than a third of households headed by someone over the age of 50 has a single occupant. That means almost 26 million Americans 50 or older are living alone. That compares to 15 million back in 2000, a dramatic increase there. Now, the reasons for this, again, it's complex. Changing norms around marriage, childbearing, all of that contributes. But it also matches up with the overall trend of Americans of all walks of life spending more and more time alone, and reporting being lonelier and lonelier. Now listen, some people, they might be wired for solitude, might be perfectly happy living alone, being alone, but as we have spent more and more time alone, more and more of us are reporting those feelings of loneliness. And there is all kinds of research about how loneliness is bad for your health, causes you to age, can lead to mental health issues, can fuel societal ills. Loneliness is one of the core factors in the societal rot that we cover here regularly, from things like addiction to despair to violence and to radicalization. So what is to blame for our drift towards loneliness? Now, the smartphone, surely one part of it. In Ward's Washington Post op-ed that we started with, he points out that 2014 was actually the year smartphone penetration crossed 50%. Was also the year that we started detaching from our friends more and more and more. Now, there is nothing about this particular technology that should cause us to abandon other important parts of our lives in order to worship it. But as per usual, just follow the money. There are fortunes to be made in keeping us glued to the screen. After all, spending time with our friends or the proverbial touching grass, it's not really profitable for anyone. Endlessly scrolling is. It's profitable for the companies selling us crap through targeted ads, and it's profitable for the companies selling the targeted ads to those companies selling the crap, and for the companies analyzing where we are, what we search for, what we click on, and every other little bit of data that they can possibly scoop up to monetize. The end result is we are both the consumer to market to and the product to be sold. And the longer they can keep our attention, the more profitable we ultimately are. On a deeper level too, we're better consumers when we are lonely and sad. Attempting to fill our emotional needs with consumer goods is the American way after all. So what is the answer here? It requires nothing less than a government-regulated shift in the entire tech ecosystem to keep our attention from being plundered and sold off to the highest bidder. A national shift to reprioritize civic life, community, and fulfillment over profits. And while we wait this revolution, well, maybe just try to spend a little extra time with your family and friends over the holidays. They might need it, and you might need it too. It's interesting, I happened to note all of these. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.